Thursday's State of the Nation address should not be an ordinary one. We are in a very deep crisis, and South Africans expect extraordinary measures to turn the dire situation around. That we are in a crisis is obvious to ordinary South Africans, as shown by numerous surveys over the past year. More than 70% of South Africans think that the country is headed in the wrong direction. People are unhappy and anxious with good reason, with many packing their bags and emigrating. We are going backwards, erasing the progress we have made since 1994. Here is why. Look at this chart. At just over 33%, our unemployment rate is the same as it was 20 years ago. When we include the millions we have given up looking for work, our unemployment rate is a staggering 44%. Youth unemployment is even higher at 60%. Nearly half of all children who start school never reach matric. These children become adults who cannot find jobs to build a better life for themselves and their loved ones. As a result of the joblessness, poverty and inequality have worsened, while food insecurity and hunger have returned as people struggle to put food on the table. The country has been suffering rolling blackouts to varying degrees for most of the past 16 years. For example, last year, South Africa and Eskom in particular was producing less electricity than we did in 2008. Now, keep in mind that Eskom owes lenders close to 400 billion rand and spends more on servicing that debt than it does on maintenance. No economy can function, let alone grow, without electricity. Although the government has indicated that it will take over some of Eskom's debt, the government's own debt servicing cost this year will amount to 332 billion rand, or just over 6.4 billion rand per week. Debt service payments are the single biggest expenditure item in our national budget this year. Ordinarily, debt is not a problem if the economy and state revenues are growing, but their growth is too small, certainly smaller than it should have been had our economy continued growing at 5% or more. As you can see in this chart, average economic growth has declined in the last 15 years, reversing the gains made in the early to mid-2000s. In January this year, the Monetary Policy Committee of the South African Reserve Bank estimated economic growth this year to be just 0.7%, partly due to load shedding and inability to move goods into and around the country. We need to grow this economy at over 6% to start reducing the suffering of the South African people by creating jobs, but clearly we cannot do this if there is no power. Therefore, we have and continue to go backwards on some of the most critical metrics. Let's be clear, we cannot solve these problems using the same people and their frame of thinking that brought us to this point of crisis. To begin to solve this crisis, we must get to the nub of the issue: money. With the ruling class having destroyed the economy and stolen billions of rand over the last 15 years, what they are not saying is that there is simply not enough money to make the investments we so desperately need. Let me make just two examples. Eskom needs over 600 billion rand to reduce its debt, conduct maintenance properly, and invest in grid and other capacity to connect us to new sources of electricity. Eskom doesn't have that kind of money, as it is looking at a 21 billion rand loss when it publishes its financials in March. Transnet needs 111 billion rand over the next 5 years just for its rail infrastructure. Right now, Transnet only has 30 billion rand, with a request for an additional 40 billion rand from government having been rejected because the government has no money. Both companies have a profound impact on the South African economy. Without electricity, small and medium enterprises suffer and eventually close, while a broken logistics system means even the supplies we secure cannot be transported from source to customer in good time. Were South Africa a business, it would be close to shutting down. We need a crisis recovery plan, not business as usual. Therefore, a significant portion of President Ramaphosa's address must be about what our financial priorities and arrangements are going to be, so we know if any of his plans can actually be implemented. Not only does he need to say how much we are going to invest in solving load shedding, he also needs to say how much is needed in total and where it is going to be found. Since we have no more room to increase the personal income tax rates of ordinary people, and that is South Africa's main source of government revenue, he then must say which of his party's fantasy projects are going to be suspended or canned so that we can focus on our biggest problem right now. Second, we need a municipal recovery plan because dysfunctional municipalities are beginning to cause systemic ripple effects. This dysfunction and corruption in municipalities is depriving Eskom of up to 55 billion rand in unpaid electricity bills, when Eskom needs that money to conduct maintenance to end load shedding and to invest in new infrastructure. So it only makes sense that all the municipalities that cannot manage their affairs must be put under administration. Otherwise, before long, they will cause a 100 billion rand hole in Eskom's income statement within a few years. Third, we must unlock private investment in energy and logistics, the backbone of the South African economy, for which we have no more money. By this, I mean extending the investment from generation to transmission, because Eskom does not have the 144 billion rand it needs to build new transmission infrastructure. The role of the state is not limited to borrowing and spending money. It also must regulate private sector conduct to prevent price gouging and exploitation of consumers. If we cannot invest in new transmission capacity, then the new investments in renewable energy are no different to building a dam with no pipelines with which to distribute that water. Now, some people get upset by the idea of private investment in national infrastructure, but it is unsustainable that we sit with hundreds of billions of rand in private sector capital generated from investments by worker pension funds, but we insist on borrowing money we cannot afford to repay. This has been the ANC's formula for digging this country deeper and deeper into debt while the rest of us suffer. Finally, we can turn this crisis into opportunity, but that needs a new orientation that will give us a new language for prosperity, not deprivation or mere survival. We have an $8.5 billion commitment from Western countries to assist us for the work we need to do to generate cleaner energy for the future. That is over 140 billion rands in grants and concessional loans that are far cheaper than the open market borrowing that we currently do. We should use that money to build solar factories where solar panels and solar systems are installed in millions of South African homes by hundreds of small and medium-sized black and woman-owned businesses. This will open new sectors of work, advance economic transformation, and save the environment. We are in a crisis. A crisis demands vision, fortitude, and capability. South Africa has all three, just not where it matters. And that is a declining ANC that no longer knows how to govern. So as our parliament descends into chaos on Thursday night, setting off a week of inconsequential political posturing, think of all these things we could do if we had politicians who took their duty to the South African people seriously and had the capability to develop the solutions we need in this moment. It is time to change from talking about poverty alleviation to poverty eradication and prosperity for everyone. It is time to shift from talking about inequality to talking about how we are going to enable the poor to build intergenerational wealth and sustainability within one generation. This is not the time for grandstanding. It is a time to unite South Africans behind a clear set of objectives and plans to get us out of this crisis before it is too late. And since not much will change despite all the speeches and comments on Thursday and in the days after, we must set our eyes on 2024 to finally give South Africa the chance to rise from the ashes. We can do this by ensuring that we have a new, stable, and visionary government to take us out of this mess.